fault.
worried like something
like,
tragic's gonna happen. All right. Hi, welcome back. We're the Book Mavens. I'm Rachel. This is Amanda. And today we're going to be discussing Alix E. Harrow's The Once and Future Witches. You want to sum it up? You want me to sum it up?
I liked your summary that you told me before we started.
Like, I'll remember it. But
Yeah,
I think
it was good.
That's great that you think that I retain
This
things.
always happens to us. We talk outside of the video and then we're like, remember that thing you said?
Yeah.
No.
No, none of it. All right. So The Once and Future Witches is fascinating. We're talking like 1890s. There's a play between kind of this fictional, that's not a word. this fictional world where witchcraft is alive. Witches are an accepted part of reality. However, women are also seeking equality, fighting for the right to vote. And we're going to see this idea of women trying to seize everything about who they are and represent themselves and seize their power, and also trying to achieve equality with men, right? So we have this intersection of history and fantasy, and it's done in such a beautiful...
The prose is beautiful.
The language she uses is remarkable. It's a story of three sisters who were estranged, horrible childhood.
Mm-hmm.
They all go their separate ways. Witchcraft is going to bring them back to each other, in which they grow from their experiences and finding out who they are and owning who they are and seizing their power. And it's a ride. And this is a story about sisterhood.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
That's what this story is about.
This is a story about sisterhood. Well,
all right. So The Once and Future Witches, what did we think? What did you think?
It's hard to put into words, to be honest. It really, okay.
We normally film on the weekends, and it is a Thursday
after school. If we've learned anything, guys, it's that we are not worth a toot after school.
We're on the struggle bus. All right.
Okay. So, let me try that again.
Mm-hmm.
What did I like about the book?
Besides how beautiful it is.
Okay.
It is so pretty. The cover is just gorgeous.
The cover is gorgeous. The prose
deckled edges
is gorgeous. I think the deckled edges is part of the story. To me, because
yeah,
of, like the way
that.
they talk about the books in the library and the Grimwalds, and like, I thought her prose is exceptional. She ties in, like, they use the whole concept of how, you know, history finds a way. We find a way to pass on knowledge, even if we can't be formal about it or have written records or anything official. That, like, humans find a way to pass knowledge to each other. As you know, a historian I really loved and appreciated, but that kind of the way that they talked about doing it was largely through like song and children's rhymes and like hiding it.
Fairy tales.
Yeah, fairy tales, hiding it where the women and children would find it, but not, you know, the oppressor. And like where they wouldn't think to look. So it's like sewn into, you know, hints into sewing samplers, and it's done as a rhyme that the kids sing. Like she brings this really lyrical tone, this really beautiful, almost poetry into her writing.
Very
style.
Descriptive. It's very descriptive. You are seeing in your head exactly what's happening, and it's done in a really beautiful way. Like when we were talking about it, I have now completed all of Alix Harrow's writings. She has not read 10,000 Doors of January, but she read A Spindle Splintered.
I read A Spindle Splintered, her short story.
And she the way she writes, it does remind me of Erin Morgenstern's A Night Circus. I think just the way that it forms pictures for you in your mind, it's a unique read that way. I really enjoy it. It feels almost like a dreamlike state. And I find that to be really, really beautiful. Now, when I came into this, I'm a bit of a mood reader. It took me a minute to get into it. And it's not that the book is slow. It's not. But I was coming off reading a book that was a very different tone. So it took me a good, I think like about 120 pages in to really like, okay, no, I'm in this I'm feeling it, and we're moving. So,
and I was in the mood for it, so I was
Yeah.
like immediately compelled. But it is a kind of story where I could see it. If you're not in that zone, if you're not in that mood, you wouldn't necessarily want to move as quickly as.
Took my brain a minute to switch gears,
Mm-hmm.
and once it did, we were there. We were through it, and I moved through it very, very quickly. But I thought this was a really fantastic book.
Mm-hmm.
I would rate this a 5-star book for sure. If we were
wow.
using this, I would give this a 5-star book. There are a lot of elements in here that I love, that we love. Strong female characters.
I mean, the
Talking
whole
about
book
the
is
women's
about
rights
strong
movement.
females.
Who can do witchcraft. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't get anything better than that. You have a very strong, well-developed villain who
He's a
hate.
great villain.
You will hate. And even
Yeah.
his, you get his backstory and everything. It is so descriptive and richly detailed.
At the end, where she like says his real name to me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of fairy tale elements.
Mhm.
So every few chapters, you kind of get an introduction to a fairy tale that's been kind of slightly twisted or fractured into this
Witch
new,
tale.
into this new way. And they change the names, or she changes the names of like commonly known
Mhm.
characters, and you're like, oh, okay. So like it takes you a second to kind of jump into it. Okay, so she's talking about this fairy tale and these characters, and she puts the spin on it, which I love. And that's something I really liked when we read A Spindle Splintered. This idea of taking these classic fairy tales and turning them into something so much more. And I found that fascinating. And I love that all of the spells, everything they do, are these little snippets of nursery rhymes. Like she was talking about, like nursery rhymes and fairy tales. I just found that so incredibly inventive, and I really enjoyed that. I think that was probably my favorite part, how imaginative she was in doing that. This idea that's how they would be passed down. That this idea of destroying knowledge on paper.
Yeah.
That will slow down progress, but it's never going to stop women from being able to share their knowledge with each other. We'll find a way.
Really, I would say
really liked it.
any oppressed culture, like they talk a lot about how there's magic is different in all of these cultural groups. They talk about they talk about the Indian Wars and the daughters. Do you remember the daughters of something with a T? Tituba?
Yeah, daughters of Tituba.
Who are Tituba?
Tituba. Isn't that her?
I'm not sure because I just read it. I did an audiobook this time, so I have no.
But that's going back to the Salem trials.
Right.
She was
Yeah, but I loved that there was this idea that everybody has a little bit of knowledge, and everybody's knowledge is a little bit different and a different way of doing things, but that it finds a way, even if your culture is being oppressed, even if your people have been oppressed, it finds a way. It finds a way to move forward. Because humans, we're a scrappy lot. Humans survive. They find a way. I will admit that I was thinking about it on the drive to work this morning, and I was reading it, and I was, because it's a fantastic tale and you get caught up in it, but she does layer a lot of real history into it. Like she's painting you an alternate reality, and it is very plausible. Although there was a part of me that was like, because it's supposed to take place in the U.S. in Massachusetts,
New York. I felt
in New
this is
England.
New York. They mentioned Chicago, so it's like you're hitting those big cities.
You're in New England somewhere, ish. But it like mentions it, and there's a part of me that knows the rest of the history of this time period that finds the idea that all of these things are happening in this one town, and that nobody from the outside, like the state level or the federal level, like has any involvement at all. Sorry, the gov teacher in me was like,
It's very like local, but the concepts they're talking about are global.
Right.
Like you're talking about, Native American, you're talking about African American populations. I mean, but just like the populations they talk about, and then referencing this preservation of knowledge. And because there's a library, the Library of Avalon that's mentioned, it's the Tower of Avalon, and it's this giant library, right? So that it's traveled around all over the world, and they keep everything, this entire conflict, very like isolated in this one city. So yes, like
there's a part of me like it feels like this should just like implode out, but it's kept so localized. My brain kind of struggled with that a little bit. I mean, it did not take away from my enjoyment of the story at all, but But like, this is just my personal background, like where I was driving to work, and that was the thing I kept getting kind of stuck on.
Suspend reality.
Right. And then like, and the what, Amanda wants her perfect world to look like kind of stuff. But that's the point, is the book makes you think and ponder, and it lingers. And that's what you want in a great fiction tale. You want it to linger with you and make you think about things.
Well, I think she was trying to accomplish two goals, and I think they just didn't fit together perfectly. This idea of making this conflict extremely personal to our main characters, which means you'd have to kind of keep it somewhat small, but also this idea that women are linked globally.
Yeah.
So it expands, but the story's very small, but it's that this impact, this influence is supposed to be all women. So yeah. So
there were
it was tough
moments
for those
where
to fit together.
Yeah, the pieces didn't quite jam for me. But it did not, but I was going to say, overall, it did not take away from my enjoyment of the book. Or, I mean, I'm telling you, her prose is stunning. It's beautiful. Do you know what I mean?
Go ahead. But I just wanted to point out, like, that we will forgive a lot in a book if there's something that grabs us. And there's so many other things that grab you that you can forgive it. And it doesn't even become part of your, I guess, your feeling overall for the book.
I agree. I didn't think on it long. Like, my drive to work one day, I thought about other things in the story more, But the prose is so gorgeous. Okay, this is a Once upon a time there were 3 sisters. They were born in a forgotten kingdom that smelled of honeysuckle and mud, where the big sandy ran wide and the sycamore shone white as knucklebones on the banks. The sisters had no mother and a no good father, but they had each other. It might have been enough. But the sisters were banished from their kingdom, broken and scattered.
It's just so beautiful, the way she writes. The very, very descriptive, the textures of things, the smells, everything. It comes across very, very well. And you really feel
lyrical.
You feel in it, but yet it's still dreamlike. It's tough. When you get into that lyrical writing, I feel like there's always this kind of a line that keeps you separate, but yet you're smelling it, you're feeling it, and it's different.
Yeah. You're an observer, but you're kind of all in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so characters you liked, characters you disliked.
Well, I love the sisters. The 3 of them are so different. And we've got Bella the librarian, who has this deep secret.
Actually, they all have deep secrets. Multiple.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I was gonna say, because they're keeping secrets from each other. They're keeping secrets from. But you're right. I know what you're referring to, but they've all got secrets.
Well, there's some representation in this book, which I thought was nice. So you have Bella, who is clearly a lesbian and trying to kind of set that part of herself aside. And I really like how they develop that about her when she realizes that she needs to stop caring about everyone else and that she has something to give, to offer someone, and that she's worth loving.
That's kind of her overall arc to me, is this self-acceptance. Like, because of the trauma of her childhood, she spends a lot of time trying to like deny or dismiss the things she knew when she was young. And about witchcraft and the power of witching and her family. She spends a lot of time trying to be invisible. And I agree. I would categorize Bella's story as one of like coming to terms with herself. Continue on. Agnes
is the middle sister, and she is someone who has, I think, sought a way to fill a need she has, an emptiness inside.
She's lonely.
And very lonely. And so you see her history when she's very young, still living at home, that she makes a mistake and engages in an intimate relationship with a boy, and there are repercussions from doing that, and having to live with that. And then also, later on, that she can't quite, I think, isolate herself as much as she would.
And that's she keeps wanting to isolate. Like, her story is one that learning that
she cares too much.
Loving people is not a weakness, even if it's sometimes painful. And so that's kind of her tale. And then you have Juniper or June or James. She has a lot of names.
Yeah. They're big on these mother names, like this idea of middle names, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And that's like their real names, their witch names.
Their mom's really cool. Name is the mother gives you a middle name. And that's like,
I like that. I just thought it was a cool
I
concept.
liked it also as like a sign of intimacy and strength. Like there's some of the early meetings when they're like starting to gather other women to their cause, you know, to show that they're serious, to show that they, you know, they use their mother name to people, and people kind of like, some of the women are like, whoa, you don't
It's like a trust
you're
thing.
like, whoa, that's for like your close friends and family, boo boo. You don't just like toss that out. We met 2 seconds ago. Like they use it as a sign of like, they use it as a connection of sisterhood, which I thought was really kind of powerful. But Juniper is the youngest. She was left behind in the traumatic childhood situation the longest.
Yes, the mother died. She's with her father. The father's an abusive, you know.
She's very, for me, I don't know how I would classify her in terms of her internal journey.
She's very strong-willed.
Yeah.
They describe her as almost feral. This idea that
Wildness.
that she's just not going to stand for things. That she gets
stuff.
very. I love her.
She says
Her
stuff
initial
all the
interactions
time.
with suffragettes, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, "This is great. Look at these women. They're doing something. I'm so excited. I'm going to go join them." And she goes, "I want to join together to learn more about witching." You know?
Yeah, and the women are just like,
and they're like,
sorry,
no, we're distancing ourselves from that because we want to get the vote. And she goes, no,
No.
that's not going to work for me. So she, you know, the big spectacle she does, then when they form their own groups, because she says, this is how we're going to seize power. It's not waiting. She was tired of waiting. And that so aligns with the women's movement, because if you know anything, historically, you had the
many
old
different
guard
versions. Yeah.
Well, you had, you know, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which I think they kind of
do.
Yeah. And who's the other one? Stanton and
Oh, you're talking about from Great Britain, the one who writes who sends them a donation. Yeah, Mrs.
That's Pankhurst, but that's in Great Britain. Pankhurst is her last name. But the no, who's the other American one? You had Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and then there was Susan B. Anthony. There it is.
I was about to say
Those
Ida
were
B.
the big
Wells.
two.
I was like,
No.
that's not.
Yeah, the old guard, and what's really interesting, because to me, if you follow all of that when that all changed with Alice Paul coming in and taking over the women's rights movement and deciding, okay, we're not going to do this slow plow state by state. We're going to go right to the federal government. We're going to lobby legislature. We're going to make a constitutional change, an amendment.
Going big, baby.
And she says, we have to keep pushing. And she got a lot of resistance from the old guard, from these women who've been doing it for so long, and they just weren't moving fast enough. She said, progress is happening. We need to be on the bus. We need to be on the train. And so that's how I see Juniper. Juniper is the new fresh face, the one that's not tired, the one that's not been beaten down, not willing to compromise, coming in and saying, if you're not going to support me on this, I'm going to start my own group. And that's exactly what Alice Paul did. So I really love that. I love that kind of connection, and how women felt about it is illustrated really, really well in this book. You get excited about it. Like I get excited. And
I get excited about suffrage, generally speaking. If you ever have the opportunity to speak to any of my students, they'll tell you she's a believer in voting and voting power.
Yeah.
So I love suffrage. I love voting history. I think it is a encapsulated view of American history. The struggle to gain it and then keep other people out is just a study in the way humans try to consolidate and keep power for themselves.